Every 2 years, at the end of an election cycle, where we give some light from the sources themselves on where we're at in House and Senate races. And to do that, we bring the chairman of the two major committees responsible for all of that right here to the Ruthless set so you can hear firsthand from them what, everybody else has to pay like 20 grand to get.
These candidates won for a reason, and they won because they have compelling life stories. They're very unique, incredible individuals who work their districts very hard.
The other interesting stat, you look at the last 69 Senate races when Trump's been on the ballot, 2016, 2020, there were 34 races in 16, 35 races in 20, 69. In 34 of the races in 16, whichever party won the presidential, won the Senate race.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Welcome back to the Ruthless Variety Program. I'm Josh Holmes, comfortably smug. John Ashbrook, left to right across your radio dial. We are missing one who's out doing the business of the American people and trying to help this great land elect people.
Hard-working Duncan back on the road. Because, we're under 60 days now from Election Day. Mm-hmm. Putting in the work.
We are putting in the work.
The old man.
The old man.
We do miss him.
Yeah, we do. And he's been surly lately.
He has really been surly. Smug got under his skin last week like nobody's business.
The Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin' Lib.
One of my favorite things is the combination when we get to the end of an election year when Smug just knows how to push every one of those buttons that's already overheating. He's redlining on everything, and he just goes and taps the gauge.
Duncan has like a to-do list of like 47 things that are due by 5, and I'm like, why don't I just make life tough for him?
Well, that's why you love the banter here on the Ruthless Variety Program. We have a very, very special show for you today. We do this every 2 years at the end of an election cycle where we give some light from the sources themselves on where we're at in House and Senate races. And to do that, we bring the chairman of the two major committees responsible for all of that right here to the Ruthless set so you can hear firsthand from them what, everybody else has to pay like 20 grand to get.
Yeah, this is...
you got to get in a room and write a healthy check. But right on the Ruthless Friday program, if you like and subscribe, which you should do if you haven't already, you get a little something extra.
It's a pretty big flex that we get to have this episode. Folks who, if this is your first time catching our every 2 year special of having both chairmen of the CC and the SC, you're about to learn so much about these races for the Senate, races for the House. It's amazing we put it together.
And even more special given the caliber of these two guys who are running these two committees. The first guy we're having, Richard Hudson from North Carolina, just first of all, a whale of a guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Real easy to talk to. Love talking to
the kind of dude
that
you'd
guy.
want to have a beer with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he brought us a bottle of bourbon, too, by the way.
Always a plus.
Which is nice. And a shirt that was hilarious. He came and brought gifts, too.
But he also brought information. He really knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Guy's clearly focused.
He really does. And so, look, we don't need a huge preamble for this. You wanted information. We got it. And let's go right now to Richard Hudson.
Cyber attacks are on the rise, with corporate megastores falling victim to data breaches that expose your private information. Now these same megastores are lobbying D.C. politicians to pass the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill will leave you even more vulnerable to credit card cyber attacks while Walmart and Target pocket billions in additional profit. Don't let them get away with it. Tell Congress to guard your card because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
We're very excited to welcome to this very stage a guy who we're talking about his work a lot, and because it's very important. This is stuff. If we're going to elect a president, you can't do anything unless you have the House of Representatives. NRCC Chair Richard Hudson, welcome.
Great to be with you.
Listen, I feel like we know each other well. We obviously know your staff very well, and I've been admiring your work, but it's tough, right?
Well, it's, someone was asking about it while I was on the road in August. I was in 10 states, did 38 events.
Wow.
Raising money for our candidates. And somebody asked me about the job being tough. And I said, a lot of nights I go to bed tired, but every morning I wake up jumping out of bed with purpose.
That's good.
Because we're here to save America. So I love having this opportunity.
Yeah, so conventional wisdom in the D.C. punditry class is House is going to be very hard for Republicans to hold. Senate map looks different, and they've basically sold on some of that. But they go through a bunch of different justifications on how they get there ultimately. What's your take on where we sit here in the middle of September, what needs to be done, how many districts are we really looking at? Because redistricting changed a lot of the ultimate targets that we're working with here. It's a smaller piece of the pie than it was 10 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people argue that the House is going to go Democrat, point out the small majority and the fact that we have seats in New York and California where Joe Biden won, but our Republican was able to win. That's kind of the basic argument people make is, they have very little ground they have to pick up. Mm-hmm. But what they're missing is these candidates won for a reason. Mm-hmm. And they won because they have compelling life stories. They're very unique, incredible individuals who work their districts very hard. They have a lot in common with the people they represent. They're very focused on serving their constituents. They're battle tested. They've been through the battle before.
Yeah.
They're going to be the hardest ones to beat.
Well, and look, a lot of them won in a 22 cycle, which everybody assumed was going to be a kind of a red wave reaction to Joe Biden. Didn't turn out that way. Certainly didn't turn out that way in the Senate. But yet we got a House majority with those candidates.
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
Well, it was actually 2020 when we picked up the majority when Trump lost. A lot of these folks were able to win anyway. We picked up 15 seats in a year when Trump lost his reelection because these candidates are unique. They're really good.
Well, it's not just talented incumbents that you're working to protect. You've also recruited some pretty good candidates this cycle, including a guy in Maine who used to drive NASCAR.
Yeah.
Well, I bet that resonates with you.
Yeah. The first time I met Austin Terrio, I said, Austin, you and I have so much in common. You're a NASCAR driver. I've always wanted to be a NASCAR driver. I mean, we're basically the same person. Austin Terrio is a great example. Kevin McCarthy and Tom Emmer had the job before me, laid out the formula. You go find these great candidates and they can win anywhere. If you build strong campaigns around them, help them put the funds together they need to tell their stories. Austin Terrio is one example. It's a guy who's got deep roots in Maine. He's got a French last name, which they tell me is very important in Maine, almost as important as Louisiana.
The closer you get to Canada, the more important that is.
Exactly, and deep family roots. And he was a NASCAR truck driver, so that's kind of cool. And he's a great guy, and he's currently a state legislator, and he connects with the people of that district.
Yeah,
I think that's also a story that isn't being told. Not just that we have such a strong recruiting class, but coast to coast, Americans agree with Republicans on the issue. They don't feel good about this economy. They don't feel good about this border. At the convention, you had mentioned that our position looks so strong that we could play in Biden plus double-digit districts, like Biden plus 10 districts. You think we're still in that way?
Well, that was before Kamala.
Yeah.
It was before. I don't know if y'all noticed, but we had a bloodless coup in America.
It happened.
It succeeded.
Yeah.
I don't think
Nobody mentions that.
Nobody really
though.
cared.
No.
You got a president of the United States with 14 million votes for nomination, and a couple people in a back room somewhere decided to move him aside, and no one really objected.
It's interesting that it didn't come up in a debate or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
That's not an issue for anybody.
Wow.
But we're saving democracy, nevertheless, right?
Yeah.
So, very democratic.
So once the coup happened and Kamala got on the ballot, we saw the numbers tighten. So
Is that basically a consolidation of the Democratic
that's exactly what
coalition?
It was. Yeah,
Okay.
Democrats decided to be Democrats.
Yeah.
They, because Joe Biden was a disaster, and the debate exposed the fact that we have a weekend at Bernie's presidency going on right now, and so a lot of people, even Democrats, just weren't comfortable voting for Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. With Kamala on the ticket, we saw a surge in Democrats coming home and having enthusiasm. Republicans, we already had enthusiasm. A lot of it's because of what you outlined, Smug, is that the country's going down the tubes thanks to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's policies. Mm-hmm. They're making us all less prosperous and less safe. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm on our side. Now there's enthusiasm on her side. So pre-debate, I'm thinking let's expand the map. Let's look at, but now things have tightened. We'll see. But I also think the sugar high's over. I think if you look at the polling, it's starting to come back to normal.
Yeah, her numbers are dropping.
And they're dropping. And I think the more people get to know her, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not a normal person. And that's not a knock at you. Like,
Wait a minute.
but you're more informed. Yeah. You care more, and you certainly are taking efforts to be informed. But most normal people right now aren't paying attention to the election, I don't think. They're probably aware the debate happened. But once normal people start paying attention, the next few weeks going into October, I think they're not going to like what they see with Kamala. I mean,
no question.
I don't know if you guys saw that Netflix show Inventing Anna. But I thought of that last night watching her performance, or 2 nights ago
right?
watching the debate.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so outrageous and audacious. You almost root for her. Like, oh, this is great.
Can she say this with a straight face? She can.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing.
That's amazing. No, it really is. It's an actress. It should be like a Oscar awarded performance. The last 8 weeks, you've seen somebody who has run as the furthest reaches of the progressive left for basically her entire career, try to reinvent herself. Her first answer last night when she's like, well, one of my passions is small business.
Yeah.
Having never worked in the private sector.
Yeah. Second most shocking after she's a gun owner.
Yeah.
Did you catch that one?
Yeah. Oh, you heard that too.
Yeah.
But so, look, there is a tendency, and you mentioned an aberration in that in 2020 when you all were able to outperform ultimately where the top of the ticket ended up in the 2020 race. But there's conventional wisdom that comes along with as the presidency goes, so does the House. What are your thoughts on that this time?
No, I think the way we've structured it, the type of candidates we've recruited across the country, from Maine to Alaska, from Minnesota to Texas, regardless of top of the ticket, we're going to pick up seats.
Yeah.
Obviously, the better top of the ticket does, the better our chances get. And, the fact that Trump's doing so well in Nevada, maybe that brings some of those seats into play. And, they're not on our target list necessarily, today. But if Trump continues to do what he's doing there, those seats come in play. So top of ticket matters. But the way we've structured this thing, we can win anyway because we've got candidates who can win in Biden territory. And I actually think it's a plus that we were running in California, New York, Oregon, places that there isn't going to be a presidential campaign. There's no infrastructure being built by the campaigns. There's not going to be TV ads. So I get to go build the infrastructure there. We're making major investments there. And in the case of California, we're running against Sacramento because a lot of the either challengers or the incumbents we're going after are former legislators or current legislators who are part of the mess in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And, if you're living in California right now and if you're paying attention, you're upset. Where do you cast that protest vote? Not statewide necessarily, not for president, but for Congress. That vote you can voice your
We've had some
frustration.
success with that, no question about it. So one of the things that we've talked about a lot on the show is how the changed base of the Republican Party over the last 10 years helps in a presidential election. I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. So if we just averaged out some districts and some states where, typically over from maybe 1994 until 2016, 2017, Republican Party was largely suburban based. The turnout rate was an average of about 76%. And we had a net advantage in a lot of midterms where Democrats had to go mining for low propensity votes. And so we did pretty well with the exception of a couple wave elections. We did pretty well in midterm elections. But if you look at the new coalition, we rely a lot on a more rural, exurban base, people who used to be yellow dog Democrats who are now rock solid Republicans. But that turnout propensity in a midterm is like 57, right? So on a person by person basis, the math makes all the sense in the world. But in a turnout in a midterm, we have a disadvantage. All of that comes up to about 78 when we're talking in a presidential election. So I got to imagine not only are we talking about defending our incumbents and looking at those few red district Dems, we're looking at those exurban places where we may not have had the vote share that we needed in 22, for example, but the turnout now has gotten to a point where we got a real shot.
No, I think you're exactly right, but we're also putting a real emphasis on this of how do we identify those low propensity voters and how do we turn them out. And looking back on this, you'll see I made a massive investment on ground game. That's not something we did the last couple cycles.
Yeah,
we put all the money in TV, digital, and a little bit of ground game. This time around, we've made massive investments, and we've called our field offices battle stations. We've opened 39 battle stations. Through the end of the second quarter, we'd already made 1 million voter contacts.
Wow!
I've got to get an updated number on how we've done through the summer, but we're out there reaching out to voters, knocking doors, making phone calls, and we're going to be dragging people to vote.
Yeah,
and really emphasizing early vote.
That's critical.
Yeah,
it's really important because you're up against some pretty deep pockets on the Dem side. You were talking about the shift in enthusiasm for Democrats when they changed from Biden to Kamala, but the shift in enthusiasm came along with a shift in financial resources as well. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you're making up the difference.
No, that's definitely true. And one of my takeaways from the last election is that the candidates who won on our side were the ones who had the resources to tell their story. The ones who lost didn't. And great examples in Michigan. John James was able to win by 0.5%, but here's a guy who'd run statewide, so he had a little bit of name ID. He had the ability to raise money. I think he spent $3 or $4 million, and was able to tell his unique story. He's an African American, former Army helicopter pilot. Like, he's got a great story, successful businessman. So he was able to break through. But just next door in Michigan 7, Tom Barrett, who's also a great candidate, also a Army helicopter pilot, state legislator, was running against Alyssa Slotkin, who was a very good campaigner. She had kind of a national security background, so unique for a Democrat. But Michigan, with Gretchen Whitmer running away with the governorship, was tough sledding for us. They had an abortion initiative on the ballot. It was tough for us. Tom Barrett got outspent, though, $7.6 to $1.5 million.
Yeah, you're never going to be able to bridge that.
But he still almost won. I mean, he came close. And now it's an open seat. Tom Barrett's going to be a member of Congress.
Oh, that's great. So give us an idea of a couple of names of things and seats that you're looking at here. They're kind of your front line.
Well, you start with the 5 Trump seats held by Democrats, and Austin Terrio in Maine against Golden. And then you go down to Pennsylvania 8, Matt Cartwright. He like Jared Golden. They're guys who go home and drive a pickup truck and act like they're one of us, and then they come to Washington and vote with AOC. And
it's amazing. It's like almost a sociopathic like behavior.
But they get away with it.
Just one of us, just thinking about how to put transgender bathrooms everywhere and that kind of thing.
Yeah. They
just
don't
one of
talk
the
about
guys.
that. They don't talk about that back home. It's weird. It's weird. But to beat a candidate like that, you got to have someone with deep roots in the district. And someone who's compelling. And we've got in Pennsylvania 8, Rob Bresnahan, who's a local business guy who took over his family business right out of high school and grew it, very successful with it. It's a union shop, so he can talk union talk. And he's a great candidate for us. And so Matt Cartwright's in trouble. You go to Ohio 9, of the Cleveland area, Marcy Kaptur. Yeah. She's been in Congress my whole life, and I'm not sure what she's done while she's been there. But we've got a guy in Derek Marin who's from the Democrat part of the district. He's been a very successful state legislator, great candidate. So we like our chances there. Go out to Washington 3, Marie Gluskamp Perez. She portrays herself as a moderate, but she and her husband advertise that they will fix your blower that you use to blow the tear gas back on the police if you come by their shop. She's a radical. She's a radical.
That's insane.
Wild.
And so we have an American hero in Joe Kent, who's a Green Beret, combat decorated, lost his wife, who was over there with our special forces folks in Syria and was killed by terrorists. So he's a single dad raising his family, and incredible guy, compelling life story. And then you go out to Alaska. The ranked choice voting got us last time.
Yeah.
And we had 2 strong Republicans, and Nick Begich and Sarah Palin, and they didn't get along too well.
It turns out that translated into their supporters didn't pick the other Republican as their second choice. Right. And we ended up with a Democrat who snuck through. Now we have 1 Republican, and Nick Begich. The party's behind him. We're all on board. And he's the only Republican on the ballot. So that's a place where Trump's going to do really well. We're going to pick that seat up. Yeah,
that's great.
Look, all those opportunities out there, and then we've got all these, as you mentioned, talented incumbent Republicans, and what looks on paper tough districts. New York and California is where if you listen to a Democratic presentation, they will stop at New York and California and spend a considerable amount of time there. But you got candidates like Mike Lawler, who
Top-notch guy.
Not only friend of the program, but just deeply embedded in the district in a way that you can't make up. I mean, it's you couldn't work harder than he is working. I think that was your point, is that these folks won in adverse conditions, and they've just continued working their tails off.
That's right. Absolutely. And, you see Mike Lawler and you say, hey, Mike, how's it going? And he tells me about some local problem in his district.
Yeah, right.
I was like, well, I'm just asking, I was being polite.
I didn't want to get into all that.
But yeah, that's why they're going to be successful. And I think we're going to pick up a seat in New York. I mean, Allison Esposito running against Pat Ryan, the freshman who won by less than a point. Allison is a former NYPD precinct commander. Yeah. She was Lee Zeldin's running mate. She ran as a lieutenant governor candidate, and they carried this district. Mm-hmm. And she's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so we're going to pick up a seat in New York. And so if we can hold our incumbents, we'll net one out. I mean,
you destroy their narrative
Yeah.
if you actually picked up a seat.
That's right.
In New York.
And then even in California, I mean, we've got 3 offensive opportunities there. One is in Orange County. It's the old Katie Porter seat. Yeah. Katie Porter spent $26 million holding that seat last time.
Just wild.
And by like 3 points. Our guy spent like $6 million. And now he's running again. He's raising more money than last time in an open seat. It's an R+2 in Irvine. That's a great chance for us. And then we've got a guy named Kevin Lincoln who describes himself as half Mexican, half African-American. He's a Marine, a beautiful young family, and he's the popular Republican mayor of Stockton, a Democrat city that dominates that district in California 9, running against Josh Harder. Kevin Lincoln, I mean, when they run the ads they're running everywhere else, it's saying, he's a Trump clone, MAGA. They're like, you mean my mayor who I love? He doesn't look like Trump.
That's right.
It's going to be hard for them. And so, I mean, we've got real pickup opportunities in California and New York.
Yeah. Well, we've noticed the recruiting over the last few cycles has been top notch. You've obviously continued that this time around. So to Ashbrook's point, obviously resources are an issue. I mean, there's all these opportunities that we discussed. Everybody has trouble trying to match a low-dollar Democratic machine on the campaign side of things. What do you think you need to do here? We just need to get people focused?
Absolutely. The one thing that keeps me awake at night is the Democrat money.
Yeah.
It's flooding. In the second quarter of this year, I was able to raise the most money we've ever raised as a committee in a Q2 of election year, and the Democrats raised $7 million more. Wow. I mean, they just keep coming. They keep coming. It's like the Terminator. But we don't have to match them dollar for dollar. We've just got to make sure we've got the resources we need, and so we've just got to keep our pace.
Yeah.
And
you see a pathway to that now, or we need to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've done really well. I mean, I would just say, folks out there who are listening, if you want to be part of the solution, go to nrcc.org and help out. Every dollar counts. And if you want to see us grow this majority and save this country, you can be part of it. But we've just got to keep working.
Yeah, and margins matter, as we've seen over the last couple of years. I mean, it turns out that it's a hell of a lot easier to govern when you got a couple numbers under your belt.
Yeah.
Than 3, 4.
Well, at one point, we were down to 1.
Down to 1.
Yeah. If someone gets a cold, we lose the majority.
Exactly. No, we'd be at a conference meeting. Somebody would sneeze. We'd run get them a hot tea. Man, are you okay? Sit down. We got a majority of 4 now. We can do anything we want, just about. We're trying to figure out this CR. But, I mean, that's really the difference for me. I don't think we're going to lose the majority. It's a question of are we going to have working majority where we can actually get things done.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. And, every seat we can pick up is going to help us get there.
You seem like you like this gig.
I enjoy it. It's, like I said, I jump out of bed in the morning ready to go because we're on a mission. And, I believe in this country. I believe we can be great again. I think we can be greater than we've ever been. I believe when Ronald Reagan said we're the last great hope for mankind on earth. But we've got to go do the work. And we've got to, we've let the other side beat us with a product that's not as good as ours.
Yeah.
And we actually have solutions that will make everyday Americans' lives better and create more freedom and opportunity for my children and your children and grandchildren. But we got to go do the work. We got to go win the debate, win the argument, turn out the vote, do the hard work of democracy to put ourselves in a position to do it.
Mm-hmm. How local are these arguments, right? I mean, it always seems to me, like in 20 years of doing this, every time the environment's against you, when you're an NRC or D-Trip chair, you talk about, well, he said, it's just the local issues that matter, right? Because the national environment's not with you. And then when it is, you're just like, well, this is going to be a national referendum on the presidency. But it's always, in truth, it's always somewhere between the 40s, right? I mean, there's good, like we talked about Lawler, local issues matter with that guy because you got a relationship over a period of time with them. But there is a national environment component to it. What do you think the mix is?
Well, I think, all politics is local. And you got to make it personal and real to the people you're asking to vote for you. But the issues really don't change much as we go across the country because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris really have ruined the economy. I mean, inflation really is hurting people. Families are struggling out there. And, where the issues change, if you're in a near suburb or an urban area, crime is really impacting your family. And so as you talk about border, you may talk more about crime in one of those districts. But you look at, fentanyl deaths. Mm-hmm. All of us know people that families have been touched by fentanyl poisoning. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, these are real problems, and they've actually been created by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Yes.
I mean, you can directly point to it. And what we saw in the polling before Kamala got on the ballot was that the American people had already made that connection.
They'd already done it.
A lot of time in elections, you spend a lot of money trying to convince people who are really upset that the reason they're upset is because of this policies of this politician you want them to vote against.
Yeah.
Well, American people had already connected the dots with Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And I just think, our job now is to inform them that what Kamala Harris's views really are, what her record really has been, the fact that she cast the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
We're going to solve inflation. We're going to borrow a bunch of money, and we're going to throw it out into the economy to people. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire to put it out. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so, as the issues we're talking about are real issues that people are really feeling, and we actually have solutions. And so it's not a complicated formula for us. And, I've heard Tom Emmer say it costs a lot more money to lie than it does to tell the truth. So,
That's why Democrats need so much money.
Yeah.
I would just want to ask you. You were talking about people feeling what the federal government's doing. You're from North Carolina. North Carolina is a very important state in this election.
Well, it's the greatest state, right, Smug?
100%.
And people are certainly feeling it there. And the Biden administration is going after North Carolinians on so many different issues. I wonder if you think you agree with Democrats who say they've got a chance in the state.
Well, North Carolina is always going to be tight because we are the third fastest growing state behind Florida and Texas. A lot of people have moved in that traditionally vote Democrat. Like a lot of states, our cities have gone very blue and everything else is very red. Mm-hmm. So any statewide race in North Carolina is going to be close. But having said that, Trump won in 16 and 20. He's going to win again this time. Mm-hmm. It's just, where else are they going to go, I guess?
It also seems very late breaking. Yeah. My entire career of doing, I feel like every cycle there's a North Carolina, whether it's a congressional race or a significant Senate race and all of that. It seems like it's always nip and tuck till like the third week of October, and then everybody sort of clicks in. What's up with that?
You're exactly right. In my previous life, I was the district director and campaign manager for Robin Hayes, who was my predecessor and mentor. And, his district was a swing district. And, I literally, for 3 elections, would wake up in the morning on election day not knowing if we're going to win or not. They were that close. But those races would always break late.
Isn't that crazy?
Right. I think it's just people are so busy, and we've got such great sports teams in North Carolina, and such a great
Carolina
quality of life.
Panthers are killing it. There's no question.
We're changing the mascot. It's going to be the Carolina Possums because we go to sleep at home and we get killed on the road.
Well, you always got the NASCAR. You always got NASCAR.
Hey, we got women's soccer. We kill it in women's soccer.
And ACC basketball.
Yeah, they turn out. They play some basketball down there, too.
Yeah,
no question about it. Listen, thank you a bunch for what you're doing. NRCC.org. People go on, help out. do everything we can. Vitally important that we keep the House. Thanks for everything that you're doing, and I appreciate you coming by.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you. And thanks for what you guys do to keep people informed. I mean, it's you've introduced politics to a whole new audience and a whole new generation, and it's important.
Very kind of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For 20 years, Americans for Prosperity has been on the front lines, taking on the radical left and delivering conservative victories. AFP's grassroots army is made up of millions of concerned citizens like you who've been winning for decades on the most important battles, like lowering taxes on American families, protecting mom-and-pop businesses from government meddling, standing up to big labor and expanding right to work, empowering students with educational freedom, and fighting the far left's lurch towards socialism. There's no doubt America faces great challenges, but we've seen before what can happen when we come together. We can change the direction of the country. Get off the sidelines. Get involved. Join the grassroots movement that wins. Visit americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. That's americansforprosperity.org/volunteer.
So, I mean, look, great information. Not going to get at that anywhere else. Based on what he said, what it is that they're focused on here. He seems pretty confident that they can get home, which, again, it flies in the face of conventional wisdom. But conventional wisdom in 2020, as he mentioned, was that the House was gone for sure. And they picked up seats and actually won the majority, retained it in 22.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful information for people to have right now, especially in a presidential year. You know, in midterms, you hear a lot more about the candidates who are running, a lot more about the personalities. But because the presidential race takes up so much oxygen in the conversation, rarely are you going to hear about the NASCAR guy who's running in Maine. You know, people in Maine know who it is. But it's an interesting story that tells you something about Republicans nationally.
And also really good information because along the lines of in a presidential year, you know, both parties are focused, people are focused on the presidential race, but the infrastructure in states like California and New York, they don't have the battleground Democrat operation going down. So it makes it all the more important to support your local House race in New York and California because these are opportunities to pick those seats up.
Yeah, I think they said, just a number of races well outside the scope of what the presidential, to your point, would be. Here's a couple of interesting stats that I have stumbled across that you need to know about. There's only 23 House members that represent a district that the other party won in the last presidential election. I mean, when I think about 10 years ago, that number was at least double that, if not more. Redistricting has really tightened this up. I mean, the number of, and out of that, 18 of those 23 are Republicans who have won, again, flying in the face of conventional wisdom. 18 of the 23 districts that have a different representation are won by Republicans who have to win that independent center-left voter, which is, again, why people think that this is going to be a tough deal for Republicans to try to defend. But as he said, you got guys like Mike Lawler and others who are not only capable of doing that, they've done it.
And that's where the majority's made.
Yeah.
That's why it's so critical to have Republicans that can run strong in blue states. That's where the majority is made.
Totally. So, listen, we're going to stay completely focused on this all the way through. They are anything but dead in the House of Representatives. And just remember, if we elect President Trump, there's no way to do big ticket things that we're talking about if we don't have the House of Representatives. So, there's nothing you can complain about after the fact about the inability to get things done if we don't have the House taking a ride with the presidential.
That is such an important point.
Really is.
Such an important point. It's not a House majority is not an abstraction.
No.
It's a difference between success and something else for President Trump.
And also, God forbid, something happens and we lose the top of the ticket. Put it in context of Biden.
Right.
We never would have known anything. There's no chance that they would have ever prosecuted Hunter Biden.
Right.
If not for what Jamie Comer and the Oversight Committee was able to uncover.
Right.
No chance.
Right.
In fact, they were trying to settle it. It only became a political issue where they couldn't settle it.
Right.
Because we had a Republican House that uncovered these sorts of things, right? Never would have talked about the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan or held any accountability for that whatsoever.
We wouldn't have even known about the secret illegal alien flights that they were flying across this country.
You're telling me my journo buddies wouldn't have covered that stuff? That's an
Shocking,
affront on
isn't
my
it?
friends.
I love that you got in front of it. That was good. Very,
You got
very
to.
smart. Also want to thank our great sponsor for today. That's Lumen. What is Lumen? Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, or it gives you tailored guidance for your nutrition. Smug, you've used this.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's super easy to use. Again, I have to give Lumen credit because they made a device that it just connects to your phone. You don't have to be like, oh no, now I'm hitting Bluetooth. Now do I need to find a device? It just works. Remember when devices used to do that? Lumen just works. So first thing in the morning, you pop the cap off of it, you take a deep breath, you exhale, and it tells you what to do. You don't have like a bunch of numbers. It's not telling you, here's your HRV, here's this, where you have to go and figure it out. It tells you what to do. It says, you are currently burning carbs or you are currently burning fat. Here's what you should consider having for breakfast. Here's what you should think about for lunch. Here's what you should think about dinner. It just lets you know the answers.
You know the answers are reliable because all of the algorithm, everything is developed by scientists. This was put together by PhDs. It's not like some fly-by-night people. So you can have full confidence in what it's telling you.
I also found it fascinating as you read more into this. It also has different things for men and women as you're aging and different recommendations based on how your body is behaving. One of the things that they were talking about is it tracks women's cycle to figure out if they have early onset menopause or some of the hormonal shifts that you can have where your diet affects all of that. I mean, that's like...
It's incredible.
You got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in like health coaches to get that kind of information. Now with Lumen, you can blow into it and get it at your fingertips. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, you go to lumen.me/ruthless to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/ruthless for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, so we're going to get the other side of the great capital of the United States, the United States Senate. You know, that means quite a bit to some of us up here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I've helped win the Senate a couple times. I know a little bit about it.
It's like you always say.
Well,
You can make a difference, so you can make a point.
that's what I always say.
That's what you always say. He's always said, and then winners make policy and losers
Yeah,
go home.
losers don't legislate.
Yeah,
You said that too.
Yeah, you said that too. Both of those things, very, very original. So, listen, this is Steve Daines, the NRCC chairman. He's a senator from Montana. Before I preview this, let me just say, there's a way to do that job in an exceptional manner, and there's a way to do that job in a horrific manner. And unfortunately, to the naked observer who doesn't do this for a living, you don't see a lot of a difference. For those of us who do this for a living, it makes a ton of difference. And I don't think I've been more comfortable in a very long time than I am with what this NRSC is doing and giving us our best chance to win the United States Senate. Let's go to Steve Daines. So you heard from Richard Hudson about what the House looks like. We got to go to the other side, where my heart is, frankly. I love the House, but not as much. And I'm just being honest. And the guy who's responsible for that is the legendary, and I mean this sincerely, you've done more in almost now 2 years than I've seen in a lot of years in terms of making sure that we are focused on what we should be focused on. NRSC Chairman Steve Daines. How are you, sir?
That was quite an introduction. It'd make my mom blush.
Well, I mean it sincerely. We don't give it away here. And honestly, we've had a lot of challenges over the years. We've had some good cycles. We've had some bad cycles. Invariably, from my standpoint, what it requires is leadership, selfless leadership at the Senatorial Committee. And you and your team started day one and have just put your shoulder to the wheel all the way through to make sure that we have good candidates. We can try to find the resources as best we can to support them all the way through. And now we're sitting with the map that if you told yourself 2 years ago that you were able to execute, you'd have been thrilled, but we're not home yet. Mm-hmm. So what are we looking at?
Yeah, well, for sure. Good grief. I mean, 8 weeks from this week, we'll be digesting election returns.
Yeah.
It's amazing how fast this is coming. But look, it's a moment. We've all seen it. We know it. There's never been a more consequential time. And the Senate has never been more consequential.
Yeah, I agree.
As you look at the uncertainties out there in the political landscape, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen at the presidential level. We're working hard to get President Trump elected, but we just don't know. The House, I think, maybe a little more uncertainty over there. So I think we got some jump balls in the House and the presidency. The Senate becomes the firewall, the circuit breaker right now to save the republic, because as we know, the founding fathers gave the Senate a unique responsibility versus the House, and that's personnel management.
Yeah.
So if the worst case scenario happened and Kamala Harris, God help us, is the commander in chief, she's talking about Elizabeth Warren as being Secretary of Treasury. I mean, these names out there that talk about a Marxist takeover.
Yeah, I saw Keith Ellison is Attorney General.
Oh,
my God.
It is. I mean, we will need to change the name to Venezuela. And here you go. And so this is where we can temper and moderate. Could be some radicals, truly radicals. I mean, Josh, I've never seen, none of us have seen a more liberal nominee for President of the United States.
No question.
No doubt. I mean, you go back a little more history and politics, you think about folks like McGovern, Dukakis, these far lefties kind of from mind. By the way, if you haven't seen the movie Reagan, great movie.
Yeah.
A little plug for it. My wife and I went and saw it. I was a sobbing mess at the end of it.
Really?
Oh my word! It's very emotional
Really?
at the end. Yeah, we know how it ends for Reagan with his Alzheimer's, and it's so touching. I was a delegate for Ronald Reagan in '84 as a college Republican at the Dallas convention. So this is very personal. Anyway, we aren't here to talk about Reagan, but it's a great movie. A plug for it.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful. But anyway, it's just a consequential moment, and that's why the Senate is just a must-win entity.
Yeah, well, let's walk through this a little bit, because the cycle started and began with a couple of 3 opportunities that we didn't know at that point who would be the nominee. Donald Trump obviously was leading, and regardless of who was the Republican nominee, the danger of losing West Virginia, Ohio, and Montana at the national level, it wasn't real, right? I mean, we knew that whoever our candidate was at a presidential level was going to carry it. The problem is, at the beginning of the cycle, you had 3 Democrats incumbents that had proven an ability to outrun the top of the ticket by anywhere from 15 to 30 points.
Yeah.
Right? And they'd done this before. They did this in 2012. Manchin, after your great recruiting of Jim Justice, decided he's going to...
He didn't even want to run.
He's
It's
gonna
cool.
go
That's a
on.
wrap.
Go on to...
Well, we had this rather radical idea, Josh, that what if we had a strategy? And I don't know.
It's funny because not everyone does.
I used to have a legitimate day job, so I cut my teeth. I was an engineer by training. I was a manager with Procter & Gamble for 13 years.
Great
and
company.
Then it is a great company. And then I moved over to the cloud computing space. We took a company public, and we sold to Oracle over a course of 12 years. The point is, I've been an
So
executive.
why did you get into this? That sounds like that's where the story's happily ever after, right? You saw the Oracle, you kicked
the
back.
dangers of day drinking right here. So I took a wrong turn, and here we are, somewhere in D.C., I guess.
I'm responsible for what?
But anyway, back when you actually had strategy, you were accountable for results, and that was, those were the good old days, and then took this turn and came back to D.C. But we laid out a very clear strategy. That is that candidates matter.
Yeah.
And we've got to recruit candidates that can win primaries and general elections.
Yes.
Now, even a guy from Montana can sort of figure that out, right? and that's so important. And so that was what happened in West Virginia was very intentional.
Yeah.
We've spent $4,900 in the West Virginia Senate race at the
Yeah.
NRCC.
Wow.
Literally,
Incredible.
that's
Is
it.
that
So
right?
we're going to
And
win.
it was what, 35 million or something the cycle before that?
right.
Yeah, we're going to win a Senate seat in West Virginia. Pick up a seat for less than $5,000, at least from an NRCC perspective.
Yeah, that's great.
Now that's a bargain. I mean, Starbucks coffee is $5,000 in DC now, so it's a bargain. So that's what. And it was intentional. It was like, how do we find the very best candidate that might give Joe Manchin doubts about running for re-election? And that was get Governor Justice. Leader McConnell was instrumental in that recruiting process. We did a hypothetical poll, Justice leading Manchin by 20 points, get him in the race. And then we played the very important Trump endorsement card there. We got President Trump to endorse Jim Justice. That really cleared up the primary, and that's when Joe Manchin thought maybe different employment
find different
might be,
stuff to do.
a different job perhaps after 24. So there's one.
Yeah.
And that takes us to 50-50.
Right.
Because, by the way, Ted Cruz and Rick Scott are two incumbents we're keeping an eye on. You know, if you look at RCP averages, both Trump and Cruz and Trump and Scott, they're both leading by 6 to 7 points respectively.
Yeah.
So they're working their races hard. The old saying in politics, run like you're 5 points behind, even though you're 5 to 6 ahead. That's exactly what they're doing. They're both going to win, despite Chuck Schumer out there saying, we're going to put Texas and Florida in play. That sounds like Baghdad
He
Bob.
can say anything with a straight face.
No,
it's very capable.
Yeah, it is. And we're taking those races very seriously. But look, we're going to win. We're going to win Florida and Texas. So that takes us really to a 50-50.
I always feel so bad for Ted Cruz because, like, the Democrats find some idiot and they throw piles of money at him, and it's always running against Ted Cruz. Like, he gets Beto.
He's like, oh, boy.
He's like, I guess I got to eat another $50 million from Dems so it doesn't get spent somewhere else.
No, it's the best stimulus package in Texas for TV stations. I mean, this is wonderful. But look, Ted will always draw a lot of money because he's Ted Cruz. The left hates Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
And Ted's running a great race in Texas. Rick's running a great race in Florida. So we feel good about those two states. So that's why we can talk openly about these pickup seats.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not lost to me. The first thing you do as a chairman of the NRCC is you make sure you bring back your incumbents. That's step one.
Yep.
Thankfully, we've got strong incumbents in red states, so we're pretty much done spending a lot of time worrying at night about them. But now you pick up West Virginia, that's 50-50. We need one more seat minimum. To have the
It
outright
just so
majority.
happens that one of those things is sort of in your backyard.
It happens to be a state I've heard of called Montana. And
A little more than $5,000.
a little more than $5,000. So these races get to be really expensive in Montana. When I ran in 2020, when Schumer came out to Montana with a week left, Josh, you remember better than I do. And he recruits our very popular Democrat incumbent governor who was just terminated at the end of 20 to run against me for that U.S. Senate race. Our race went from being safe R to lean Dem until about the middle of the summer. It went to toss-up. But that race was basically a tie jump ball all the way to the end, and then we started to see a little separation. He'd never lost a race.
Yeah.
Attorney General, governor, reelected in 16 governor by 4 points when Trump won the state by 20. Very impressive kind of crossover appeal.
He'd never run against Steve Daines, though. I will say that.
Well, that's true, but look, when we went to the election night party at the Hilton Garden Inn in Bozeman, Montana, my hometown. I went to kindergarten through college there. We would show up at the Hilton Garden Inn, and I didn't know if it was going to win or lose that night. You know, it's those crazy moments where you have one pocket card saying, "Thank you, Montana, for 6 more years of service," and then the other card is like my resume. Like,
I'm open for board seats.
I used to swing a hammer at Daines Construction growing up as a kid. There it is. So, and we ended up winning by 10 points, 55-45.
Oh, it's masterfully done.
And it was a $210 million race, outspent by $50 million. And that's real money in a state that has 1 million people and 3 million cows.
That's wild.
So, but if you normalize that for population, I told Marco Rubio, I said, Marco, that's like having a $4 billion race in Florida. Just do the population multiply. I said, Marco, what if you had a $4 billion race? He goes, that's impossible. I said, I had 210 million. So if you look at it on a per vote basis, it's the most expensive race. I mean, you guys are all the political insiders here. Yeah. Next time you play Trivial Pursuit and they say, what's the most expensive political race in the history of America, maybe the world, on a per vote basis, say the U.S. Senate race, Montana 2020, and you've answered correctly.
No, it's true. It's true. It only exceeded on a pro rata basis that 04 Thune race with Daschle.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that thing?
Yeah, that was very expensive.
Where at the time, and the numbers are now adjusted for Biden inflation.
That's true, right?
But you have to do. You have to
true. It is Biden inflation.
But you far exceeded that.
Well, anyway, but yeah, so we know what it's like to go through a massive, hurricane force wind race in the state of Montana. And, Jason Thielman, who's now the executive director of the NRCC.
Doing a great job.
He was the campaign manager. So really we've got a all-star team right now running the operations in Montana.
But you do right from the bat. And the thing is like John Tester's a tough out. He wouldn't be there if he wasn't. He's won when Republicans have carried the state. He's been he's got the ultimate chameleon thing going on where he looks and sounds like somebody from Montana and he votes like somebody from Berkeley, California.
The other night when I was watching the debate, I was like, Kamala Harris is pulling the John Tester play, where when they're in D.C., as far left as can possibly be, But then it's an election cycle, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I'm very tough on the border. I own a gun." Where does this come from?
Look at my fingers.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, no. But we've also had some trouble in recruiting and getting a candidate that matches up well
Yeah.
with John Tester. And that was your focus right from the beginning.
Well, I'm the son of a U.S. Marine. Montana has the second highest per capita veteran populations in America.
yeah.
So when you think about a profile of a candidate in Montana, a veteran background would be very compelling, especially when you think about John Tester, who's chair of the VA committee.
Right.
So that was something we were thinking about. And Tim Sheehy, graduate of the Naval Academy. His wife's a graduate of the Naval Academy. She's a Marine. He's a Navy SEAL. 200 combat missions. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 4 little kids at home, and a successful businessman and 38 years old. A remarkable story. And
Also handsome as the day is long.
yeah, remarkably articulate, too, and just off the cuff can stand up. And we brought President Trump into the state August 9th, into my hometown, into the basketball arena. The arena was jammed. I mean, not a seat. And there were 8,000 people in the parking lot in front of a Jumbotron that could not get into the basketball arena.
It's just unbelievable.
And she just crushed it. Yeah. So that's where we're at. I mean, we started off with she with virtually zero name ID.
Yeah.
And now you look at the last half a dozen polls, public polls we've seen, he's up in every one of them. 2 points, 3 points, 5 points. And then the AARP poll, which, by the way, is, I think, one of the best polls out there because they combined Fabrizio, Trump's pollster, and they take the Harris pollster. And they basically say, you both have to sign off on this poll, which means we have an objective poll that doesn't have a finger on the scale either way. And that AARP poll that came out last week had Sheehy up 6 against Tester head-to-head on the multi-candidate ballot, which we will have. There'll be a Libertarian and likely a Green Party candidate. She was actually up 8 points.
That's wild.
That's the biggest gap we've seen yet.
Yep.
Our internals are seeing similar, good numbers here with Tim, definitely up, 3 to 5 points. So
my only fear is they're going to hand John Tester a canteen and a pistol at some point and tell him to go fight on his own.
Well, they might, which brings me to a state that's near and dear to my heart, and I know near and dear to yours, as well as a former P&G employee.
Yeah.
It's the state of Ohio. We've got a great candidate, Bernie Moreno, another just tremendous opportunity for a pickup there. But Sherrod Brown, similar to Tester, has been a tough out through the years.
Very
I wonder
true.
if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
race.
well, and look, I mean, even just back in Montana, this race is far from over from our view. This is where we've got to just double down, triple down, ground game operations, air war.
Yeah.
We've got to put this race away.
Yeah.
It's a must win. And
Have
so
to win.
nobody's backing away, and we can't because
Yeah.
that's seat 51.
Yeah.
Talk about the threats to the Republic right now. We've got to have that one. I like where we're at in Ohio. Just objective. I'm a chemical engineer by degree. I'm more left brain than right brain. I'm a numbers guy. At the end of the day, politics and these elections are about numbers. And you look at where Bernie's at right now. He's down 2 points, 44-46. This is a state that Trump's going to win by 8 to 10 points. If you look at the undecided voters right now in Ohio, those are more our people than their people. They're lagging on the ballot. You look at the Trump number. The Republicans haven't come home yet on the ballot yet for Moreno. They've all come home for Sherrod Brown, the Democrat side. They typically consolidate 90-95% right out of the gate.
Well, again, it's his first time in a general election ballot in the state of Ohio, right? So it's going to take
it's gap. And Bernie basically Bernie Moreno had exhausted his resources in a contentious primary. By the way, he won every single county, all 88 counties in Ohio. Very impressive win, running against 2 tough opponents. Yeah. And so he had to rebuild his campaign coffers. But I'll just tell you, looking at the raw numbers and thinking about the way Ohio behaves, you look at the 2020 election for Trump, it was 53-47. Look at the 2022 election for J.D. Vance, the 22 Senate race, basically 53-47. Here's the point. I think increasingly there's less ticket splitting going on in a state like Ohio. It's becoming more of a red jersey, blue jersey fight at the end, which bodes well for Bernie Moreno with Trump on top there by 8 to 10 points. The other interesting stat, you look at the last 69 Senate races when Trump's been on the ballot, 2016, 2020. There were 34 races in 16, 35 races in 20, 69. In 34 of 34 of the races in 16, whichever party won the presidential won the Senate race. In 20, it was 34 for 35.
Wow.
So when Trump won the state, our Senate candidate won. When Biden won the state, their candidate won. There was one exception, that was Susan Collins in Maine, where, of course, Biden won Maine, and Susan Collins won her Senate reelect, by the way, by 9 points when she was given up for dead a couple times. So this is why you look at these polls right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the next 8 weeks? I just don't know.
Yeah.
But you just look at the history when Trump's been on the ballot in 16 and 20, some of these Senate races. I mean, Ron Johnson was given up for dead in 16. He really was. In Wisconsin, to find goes down 7, 8, 9 points, and he ended up winning by nearly 3. Joni Ernst in 2020 was I mean, she was looking in pretty tough shape coming in the middle of October in Iowa. She ends up winning by 7 points. So I'm not in any way projecting that kind of a shift we're going to see on the numbers. But what I am saying is, when we're right now within 2 to 4 points on many of these other races, 7 more races beyond Ohio, we're going to be in some razor thin, I think, margins when we come to election night.
Well, I mean, to your point, it'd be hard to overlook the fact that the battleground for the presidential, in large part in these blue wall industrial Midwest states, there's an even overlap with Senate races, right? We talked about Ohio, Pennsylvania, another one I want to get to, Michigan, Wisconsin, all in that same kind of category, where I think you're right. If you see a Trump win in 2 or 3 of these, reasonable to conclude we got a pretty darn good shot at picking up a Senate seat there too.
It likely will converge, and we've seen that too. We call it the split from ticket splitting that's going on right now with Republican voters. Back in 2008, the average between the presidential and the Senate ballot Republicans was about 5. In 2012, it narrowed down to about 4. 2016, it narrowed down to about 3. 2020 was about 1.5. So we've seen this narrowing. And again, it's becoming increasingly red jersey, blue jersey. With that probably going to happen here in 24, when Trump winning some of these battleground industrial states, that bodes well for guys like Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania.
Who's running a great campaign.
He's running a great race. That race, CNN had a poll last week, had that 46-46. Casey's a tough out as well. I mean, they're all tough outs. There's not an easy out on the battlefield right now.
Well, it's hard to beat incumbents.
It is hard to beat
0 incumbents lost last cycle.
That's the force working against you on this. It's very, very true. So we've got to have our very best, and Dave McCormick's exactly that in Pennsylvania. By the way, another nice veteran thread. But besides being born and raised in Pennsylvania, here's a West Point guy, 82nd Airborne, deployed to Iraq. What's not to like about that? And been successful in business.
Yeah, no,
I think that's a pretty good candidate for a United States Senate.
Every time I talk to him, it makes me feel insufficient. Like what I've accomplished in life, I feel like everything he touches turns to gold.
Yeah.
So, but you feel good about where we're at in Pennsylvania?
I do. Well, we've got the right candidate. The way I look at it too, I feel like if I'm a head basketball coach, my goal here is, with a minute left in the game, to have a chance to take the final shot and win, put ourselves in that position. So what do you do when there's a minute left, you're the coach, and the game's tied? You want the best athletes on the court with the ball in their hands.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to have here with Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, with Eric Hovde in Wisconsin, with Mike Rogers in Michigan, with Sam Brown out of Nevada. Of course, Tim Shee and Bernie Moreno. You got Kerry Lake, and you got Larry Hogan in Maryland. Speak about the best athlete in the court.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because it seems to me that Democrats, look, by and large, they run pretty good campaigns. They govern like idiots, but they run pretty good campaigns. And I'm watching this race. I've been watching it from the beginning, and it seemed to me like it was an absolute abject failure for them not to do something in the summer months against a guy who's got a 65% approval rating, huge amounts of goodwill within the people of Maryland by 2 terms of governor. Here we are in the middle of September. He's still right side up as all get out. He's got a ballot lead. It was going to get expensive for them, and I like his chances.
Yeah, we do too. I just saw Larry here this week, and look, his favorability numbers, Josh,
it's wild.
They were higher after he left office, which is unheard of typically for a governor, especially in a blue state like Maryland and a Republican governor. And look, Larry is, first of all, he's just rock solid. I mean, he's such a retail campaign
works
guy.
His tail off.
He works his tail off, and people love him. There's not much not to like about Larry Hogan. Yeah. And if he's probably in some ways one of the closest we have to like a Reagan Republican out there in a blue state, it's Larry Hogan. And so I like where we're at in that race. We know it's a tough race because Harris wins Maryland by 25, maybe 30 points. But Larry Hogan, it's not the first time he's had to overcome of blue voters, and Larry is known very well. So his opponent hasn't been that well defined yet, and I'm sure there'll be some folks out there doing that over the course of the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, I would think. All right, so Michigan, you touched on Rogers, Hovde in Wisconsin. Both of those races look pretty tight from the outsider's perspective.
Yeah, and they do. Well, think about Michigan's an open seat.
Yeah.
You always look at first. We talk 3 red states, and you go to 3 open seats. Anytime you have retirement, it's opportunity. So Stabenow retires in Michigan. Mike Rogers, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, he kind of handles something like that Dave McCormick of Michigan kind of. He'll have very few unforced errors on the campaign trail. Knows how to win. When he was a House member, he was in kind of a swing district, so he understands what it is to have a tough fight. But
he's certainly. Look, if you look at these things just on paper, you never want a candidate who has the capacity of performing under a generic ballot in a tough state. This is a guy who will never do that.
Yeah,
I mean, he is, like you said, it's kind of no mistake ball with.
That's right. He's been around the block,
and
he's the kind of lead from day one senators that we need. In fact, these candidates, top to bottom,
and he can do that. They can all do the job.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
An important part.
Well, it's like think about the strategy. It's win a primary, win the general, and by the way, govern once you get here. Nice. It is. We do have a few challenges here, Josh. Just by the way, but they come with such a great perspective, both in domestic policy, but also geopolitics.
Yeah.
A guy who chaired the House Intelligence Committee, pretty good guy to have in the United States Senate as you think of what's going on with the threats of Iran right now and China and Russia and so forth. So that race is a toss-up right now in Michigan. It's a resource race, and that's the biggest worry we have here, Josh.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Let's talk about that. Is that we've got the map set. There's 9 races we're focused on. 3 red states, 3 open seats, and 3 presidential Senate battlegrounds. It's a 3-3-3. This map has spread. It's how do you get enough resources to cover it? There are winnable races that we right now don't have the resources to take across the finish line.
Yeah.
That's where we're at here with 8 weeks left.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. Do we feel like we got a pathway to get there? Because it feels like Democratic money is just pouring in hand over fist.
It is. No, they raise money better than they raise corn in Iowa. I mean, look at it. Kamala can't do much of anything except she can raise money.
Yeah.
And when they transferred $10 million there to the House committee, the Democrats, and then $10 million to the Senate committee, we just have another $10 million gap we got to go fill. And by the way, the NRCC, we've had a record fundraising cycle.
You guys have done
We just
great.
broke $200 million raised as we finished up last month, breaking the last 2 record cycles. But the problem we have is the hard dollars the Democrat candidates raise is just pouring into the Iraq Blues. So this is why I think there's a misperception that somehow Republicans have all the money and the Democrats don't.
So where do our
Opposite's
people
true.
go to help out?
So you can go to Senate24.com.
Senate24.com
is where patriots can go to and help us out there.
And they can look up, if they go to the NRSC's website as well, they can look up what candidates.
Yeah, they can. They have visibility. If there's a certain state candidate you like, you can make sure you direct that specifically to that candidate. And one thing we've done, too, is I've told my team we started this job, I'm not here to have a statue of Steve Daines in front of the NRC building. It's called the Ronald Reagan building.
You might get one, though.
I don't want one. and I said, we're here. It's wonderful we've had record-breaking fundraising results, but that's nice.
You want W's.
But we want W's, but we said we're conduiting dollars. We've conduited over now $5 million direct to candidates. The way we structured it. And that doesn't count in our numbers. That's not our $200 million number. It's $5 million because that's right to hard dollars to candidates. The very best dollar you have is right to the candidate in the hard dollars.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like he studied all of this before he had the job. It's almost like he had a plan and executed it. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of all of us who spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about this. It brings us great comfort to know that you are running the show and have done a terrific job. We just got to finish this thing up.
We do 8 weeks to finish it off.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Appreciate
Thanks for joining
it.
you guys. Thanks for
Thanks
joining
much.
us. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly knows his stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this guy, and I've known about him for years. There's a mutual friend in Cincinnati who's been a longtime family friend of my family's. I won't say the guy's name because I don't want to give him any undue publicity. But he's the kind of guy, and his family's the kind of family that if you know them, you're like, these are the best people on the planet, and I just think you can learn a lot about somebody by the company they keep. And the fact that Steve Daines is friends with this guy and this family, I just makes me love him so much.
Totally. And one vignette before we get out of here. When you're an NRSC chairman, you take on a lot of political exposure because you got to make very unpopular decisions. It's not particularly popular to say, for example, that the NRSC has an opinion on what kind of candidate will ultimately win a general election, because there's a cottage industry of outside, quote-unquote, conservative groups that work very hard to try to ensure that there's political exposure to make those decisions very unpopular for you. And what they want to do is fund ideological candidates that may not be a perfect fit for their state, but they fit for whatever it is that they're trying to promote as an organization, which has nothing to do with winning or losing. And oftentimes those two come into conflict. And when they do, you need a chairman to say, no. We are recruiting a candidate who can win this state, and this is what this looks like. I found this person, and I'm going to support this person all the way through. It sounds like a very simple proposition, right? You'd be shocked at how hard that is for some people to do. Steve Daines, when the first day that they walked in there, they knew one of the top opportunities to get was in his home state of Montana. When you choose to pick that kind of fight in your home state and your name is on the ballot the next cycle, that's balls, man.
Yeah.
That's balls. And you want those kind of people to make decisions on behalf of what's best for the Republican Party. Never hesitated at any point. We don't know how this cycle is going to pan out. I do know Steve Daines has given us our absolute best opportunity to win, though.
Yeah.
And it could not be more critical. Like, Kamala and the Senate Democrats have made it clear their next move is they want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to pack the court. They're now openly saying they want to pack the court. This Senate majority matters a lot.
It does. Well, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is really, it's like unique stuff that we get to do here in the Ruthless Variety program. Smug, I think we did it.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode, gentlemen. Thank you so much to Chairman Hudson. Thank you so much, Chairman Daines. And thank you so much to the Minions. Remember, like and subscribe if you want to opine, and let a friend know about Ruthless too. So, until next time, Minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Tuesday. Stay ruthless.